Terry Tucker is one of the strongest people I've met. Terry's life work is teaching others about how to use hard life situations and illnesses to create resilience and triumph despite the pain. In his professional career, Terry has been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT team hostage negotiator. So cool, but so stressful. A high school basketball coach, a business owner, a motivational speaker, and for the past 11 years, a cancer warrior, which has resulted in the amputation of his foot in 2018 and his leg in 2020. He is the author of the book Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Terry has also been featured in Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership magazines. It was just amazing to get to talk to Terry today and to hear his story and to just hear about his journey, especially from the male perspective, because I know I speak a lot to women on this podcast. I find that a lot of my listeners are women, but getting to talk to someone who's been through so much and really made what he can out of his situation, has just thrived, I think is so important to hear about, because you often hear, I feel like, from a lot of people with chronic illness, you want to hear their journeys because you're on that journey yourself and you're going through that pain, but you also want to feel their hope and see that it's possible for you to have a successful and thriving future as well, even if your chronic illness hangs around. Like Crohn's, you get diagnosed with it and you have it for the rest of your life, whether you're in remission or not. And that can be a really scary and daunting thing that put me into a really deep depression when I was first diagnosed. So reading that it was possible for people to heal, even if my journey ends up looking differently, just gave me so much hope and so much renewed joy and excitement for life that I previously really struggled to find. So that's why I really wanted to share this conversation with you guys. He's just an amazing person, and I really hope that you enjoy our conversation. Make sure to listen to the end to hear about where you can connect with Terry and learn more about him if you're interested and want to dive into his practices, read his book, and all of that fun stuff. So without further ado, I'm really excited to present Terry and our conversation with you guys. Hello, lovely people, and welcome to the Lovely Digest podcast. I'm your host and friend Emily, founder and creative director at Bet Creative, sharing weekly wellness wisdom with you every Wednesday. My goal is to help you design your dream life and make the transition from being in information overload to being your own personal success story. Make sure to subscribe to get notifications every time a new episode comes out so you don't miss the latest simple and actionable tips for improving your well-being.
Healthcare crisis, right? So
hopefully one bit by bit.
yes.
Okay. So welcome to the podcast. I know that we've been chatting a little bit, but I would love for you to share a little bit more about your background and go back in time and just tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from being a D1 athlete to author.
Well, first of all, Emily, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking with you. I'll give you a sort of Reader's Digest version of this. Of course, you're young. You probably don't even know what Reader's Digest is. It's like, what's he talking about? But I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually received a scholarship to play basketball in college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. Wow. After I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this is long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. Unfortunately, I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's. Then I moved to hospital administration and then made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After law enforcement, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last 11 years now, have been battling a rare form of cancer. 2020, I published my first book called Sustainable Excellence. And I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow, that's so cool. I don't know if we talked about this, but my grandfather was in the Air Force.
Yes, we did. I think when we first talked, you were telling me that. Yeah, pretty cool.
That's awesome. So many things to touch on, but one thing that I wanted to ask about, because I haven't really had the chance to talk to someone who has had maybe such a high stress job as a hostage negotiator. Um, did you notice that the stress impacted you? Where were you kind of at in maybe your health journey at that point? How did that work out?
Yeah, I had not developed cancer at that point in time. My cancer occurred probably 6 or 7 years after I got out of law enforcement. Yeah, it was certainly a stressful job, but I worked with good people. I had really good training. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to develop a relationship with somebody who, I mean, let's face it, if you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by, my brothers and sisters who are, trying to keep me safe, you're probably having the worst day of your life. And to try to develop that relationship, to try to develop that trust, and that's what it was. I mean, the relationship between a hostage negotiator and a hostage taker or a barricaded subject is the same type of trust that you try to develop, with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband, wife, or a parent, child, or a boss or subordinate. And you're trying to do that under very stressful conditions. And you're trying to do that in some way with somebody you've never even met before,
Mhm.
so it was difficult. And that's why a lot of times negotiations took hours and hours and hours, because there were several times where, I'd be over here talking to the person about something when the real problem was over here, but they didn't trust me enough. We hadn't developed that rapport for them to talk to me about why they were here. So, I mean, in any kind of first responder role, there's a lot of stress and people handle it differently. People drink, people do drugs, people, get into toxic relationships and things like that. And there was always, hey, we're going out after the call up, but do you want to come? I'm like, no, I want to go home because my family was my sanctuary. My family was what grounded me and allowed me to go out and do that job. I just wanted to be at home. I was a homebody, and so going out to a bar or a club or something like that, that was never my thing. So I'm a pretty simple guy, and my family is really kind of what my family and my faith got me through those difficult times.
Mm, I love that. I'm also very much a homebody. How would you say, you talk a lot about resilience? So how would you say that maybe that job or your career impacted you learning more about resilience and being able to apply that to when you got cancer?
I think that started for me early. I was 15 years old. I had 3 knee surgeries in high school. And first one was when I was 15. And I remember after those knee surgeries, when I went back playing basketball again, my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower since your operations, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I was, I would hear those things and it would be like, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still reaching out about the possibility of playing for their college or university. So I learned early that I needed to change that narrative, that I needed to, sort of take the negative and turn it into something, excuse me, positive. And so that, I think, is carried over through my entire life. And I talk a lot about callousing your mind. And I have these 4 truths, and the first one is about controlling your mind, or your mind is going to control you. And people always, well, how do you do that? And my response is, you do something every day. And I do this. I'm not one of these, if I'm going to say it, I'm going to do it as well. Do something every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you'll be so much more resilient to handle that pain when it presents itself. And an easy way to think about it is, if you don't want to do it, do it. I don't want to study for that test, study for the test. I don't want to clean the house, clean the house. I don't want to go to the gym, go to the gym. The things that you don't want to do, because that's a very simple, very simplistic way of trying to exercise that philosophy of doing hard things. And just find something you don't want to do and then go do it. And those present to us every day. I just want to hit the snooze button. I want to sleep in. No, get up early. Meditate, go for a run, go for whatever you don't want to do. Just try to do that. And I think that gives you that resolve, that helps you to develop that calloused mind, which makes you more resilient.
That's a really nice, simple, but like actionable tip that people can take. So, how do you navigate the day to day and maybe the uncertainty, or if you're doing well now, how did you navigate that and maybe apply that mindset when you had cancer and were in pain?
I think one of the things that team sports taught me, and for me it was sports. I think it can be whatever team you're on, whether it's your family or you're in a band, whatever it ends up being. We're all, there's a group of people that we surround ourselves with. And I think what team sports taught me, I started playing basketball when I was 9, played all the way up till I graduated from college when I was 21, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So, I don't get me wrong. I don't want you to think, or your audience to think that, that I don't have bad days. You're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I have those bad days. I'm still being treated for tumors in my lungs. And, there are days that I cry. There are days I feel sorry for myself. There are days that I get down. But when I'm in those ugly days, I find that I'm looking in. It's, oh, woe is me. This is terrible. It's all about me. And I find a real simple way to kind of, at least for me, to get myself out of that is to go find somebody to help. And help doesn't have to be, you're doing something great. It may just be, hey, how's it going? Or you want to have a cup of coffee, or, tell me about how your day's been, or something like that. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not focused on me. I'm focused on somebody else and trying to make a positive difference in their life. So, I think a lot of times we make life much more complicated than it needs to be. So we can all find somebody, pick up the phone, call a friend who, is, I don't know, having a bad day, or, just found out they have a certain type of illness, or got let go from their job, or whatever it is, and just talk to them. A lot of times we think we want to solve the problem. We want to give answers. Well, you're not going to solve that problem. Unless you can give that person a job or something like that. But just listening to them, giving them a sounding board that allows them to sort of bleed off a little bit of that, anxiety, that depression, that grief, just allows, excuse me, just allows them the opportunity, to think that, hey, somebody cares. I'm not alone in this. And if we know that, if we know we've got somebody in our corner, it just makes difficult things that much easier.
I'd like to take a pause in the episode to talk about this amazing opportunity to get 20% off Absorb Plus in the Listen to Your Gut shop. If you have Crohn's or chronic illness, you may have heard about Listen to Your Gut. I reached out to the suppliers of Absorb Plus to see if I could give you guys 20% off rather than sign up for their affiliate program, and the team at Listen to Your Gut graciously agreed. Absorb Plus quite literally saved my life and bought me time while I was waiting for my medication to get approved by insurance. we all know how that can go. It's an elemental shake, meaning you can be on a completely liquid diet, gain weight, and get all the nutrients you need without needing the use of your intestines. Absorb Plus is digested completely before reaching the colon, so it can have a break from working so hard. If you want to try it, use my code EBECK20, that's EBECK20, for 20% off to listentoyourgut.com. This is an offer not available anywhere else. Right. And something that I've been finding recently too, because a lot of people talk about journaling, but it's really hard for me. Like, I'll get this inspiration to journal, but I'll be maybe in the car or somewhere where I don't want to go up and get up and go get my journal from the other room. And something that I've learned is that voice noting, even if I feel like I am anxious about talking to a friend and like burdening them, or maybe someone isn't around, or I don't want to talk to someone else, I'll just voice note. And while I'm talking, that will bring up some ideas that I get maybe while journaling, and I'll get that extra inspiration or think of things that I can do to get myself out of the negative mindset and more into like a how can I move on or come out of this state. So yeah, I really love that. And just I feel like talking out loud is can be really helpful if you're not a journaler.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point. I wish I could remember the author. I was listening to a podcast. This individual had written like 10 or 12 books, and the host asked them, "Well, how do you put what your thoughts are down on paper?" And he made kind of a funny comment. He said, "Well, I write so that I can figure out my thoughts." He's like, I don't know my thoughts, until I start to write things on paper, or in your case, to talk out loud, and then that generates thoughts, that generates ideas for you, and you can, oh, well, yeah, I guess that's how I feel about that. And I mean, I just thought it was kind of interesting. Like, well, you don't know how you feel, and basically, it's like, yeah, I don't know how I feel. I don't know where I stand on this or what my opinions are on that. So for me, it's writing it down, or for you, it's talking it out in a way that helps you to organize your thoughts and your ideas so that you can either do this on a podcast or write a book or whatever you end up doing. So yeah, don't think that you have to have it all figured out. A lot of times people use journaling or talking out loud to kind of figure out where they stand and what their thoughts are.
Right. And I feel like personally, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this, there's a lot going on in your brain and it can feel so overwhelming and you're, oh, I'm going to forget this and I need to remember to do that. Just writing it down or voice noting it or whatever, like getting it out, you'll see that it's actually not as long of a list. And usually the things are maybe something that you can do really quickly in 5 minutes. And it just becomes easier to see it on paper or listen to it again in a voice note and be like, oh, it wasn't like too much and it's not as overwhelming as I thought. And I can take action on this. And now that I'm also not thinking about it and not worried.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. I remember reading a study from the Cleveland Clinic that they did on people's minds, and they said their conclusions were we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our minds every day. About 3,500 of those thoughts are new. Most of them are thoughts that we've either thought the day before, the week before, or something like that. So we have about 3,500 new thoughts every day, and our minds operate at a speed of about 1,000 words a minute. So think about that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember what I took typing in high school. And I mean, I was lucky if I hit 30 words a minute, not alone 1,000 words a minute. So you think about that, and you make a great point. When you have that thought, write it down, because there's a good chance it's going to be gone if you don't, because there's another thought coming right after it. And if you've got a new thought, oh, I hadn't thought about that before, write it down, because that way you're pretty much not going to lose it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I appreciate the science behind that. Usually I like to have a little bit of science behind my ideas, but yeah, that's really helpful. And that's crazy that we have so many thoughts. I just want to go back to you saying that you have bad days, and you might have more tools and tips and tricks, and that's why you're here getting to share them. But you do have bad days. Were there any points in your life where you felt totally defeated, and how did you find the courage to keep going? And maybe before you had these um, tips and ideas that work for you, how did you first get yourself out of that rut?
Yeah, there were several. When I have a rare form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And when I was diagnosed in 2012, it was a death sentence. All they had to offer me was surgery, and they were like, if it's in a place where we can't cut it out, then there's really nothing we can do for you. But my doctor put me on this drug called interferon, which is usually it's used for a lot of things, but it's primarily used for people who have hepatitis. They give it to them, it kind of clears up the hepatitis in their liver. But this drug kind of kills everything. I mean, the upside of having interferon for 5 years is that I didn't have a cold or a flu or anything, which was great. But the side effects of the interferon for me were that I had severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And as I mentioned, I took those weekly injections for 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And it wasn't just I don't feel good. It was I was throwing up. I had the chills. I was shaking. I was, headache, everything that we know. We've all had the flu. And it was every week. And it got to a point where I felt that there was a difference between living and not dying. And I really felt I was kind of in that not dying phase. I really wasn't contributing. I wasn't giving anything. I was just sort of taking. I was just trying to survive from one day to the next. And I remember, I have a fairly strong faith life. I remember saying, to God, it's like, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing anything here. I'm not contributing anything. Just take me. Just let me die. And I never contemplated suicide. I don't want anybody to think that I did that, but I was just like, just take me out of this. I'm so sick of being sick that I just want to die. But obviously he didn't take me out of this. But I think what he did was give me the strength to move forward, to continue, just one day. And it really was. I mean, if you would add, what are your long-term goals? It's like, I want to get up tomorrow morning. That was literally a long-term goal. I mean, it was, I don't have long-term goals. I don't know if I'm going to be here. And then after I had 2020, I found out I had to have my leg amputated, and I had these tumors in my lungs, which I'm still being treated for. About 8 months after that, my doctor showed me my CAT scan, and I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and say, well, gee, that doesn't look like it's supposed to be there. So I had these big tumors in my lungs, and I had fluid all around the pleural spaces. And I remember looking at my doctor and saying, how was I alive? And he kind of got this grin on his face and sort of shook his head. And he's like, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been, which said to me that God's not done with me yet. So a lot of it has to do with what I call my 3 F's: faith, family, and friends. And I think those have gotten me through these 11 years. I absolutely know without my faith, I wouldn't be here. Certainly, I know without my family, there's no way. And, when you get a chronic illness, when you get a terminal illness, you really find out who's in your corner, who's going to be there for you, who's going to be in the foxhole with you when things really get difficult. And, I learned a lot through the 3 F's.
Oh, I love that. What would you say to someone who's just been diagnosed with a chronic illness or cancer and might be going through that I just want to make it to tomorrow phase?
I would say this. I think we all have a breaking point. But I think that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever give ourselves credit for. I'm going to tell you kind of a goofy story, but it's a true story. Back in the 1950s, there was a professor at Johns Hopkins University who did an experiment with rats. And he took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took the exact same rats and put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours.
Wow.
Now think about that. The first time, 15 minutes, you're just not going to fail. You're going to die. And
Yeah.
the second time, 60 hours, which said to me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our
Mhm.
lives that, maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year. But if you keep doing, what you're doing, if you know you're on the right road, if you know you're going to eventually get to where your life is going to be better, that you have that hope. Like I said, maybe not be immediate hope, but knowing that you're doing the right things to get you to where you need to be. So hope was really important. And the second thing is just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. We give up, we quit, we give in long before our physical bodies are ever willing, to kind of putter out on us and be done and die. But we quit, we give up, and we just don't give up. Now we got to blame somebody. I mean, most people will never get to where they want to be in life because they won't stop whining and complaining about where they're at. Very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. And I know when I got cancer, people were like, well, who do you blame? I'm like, well, what do you mean, who do I blame? It's like, well, you got cancer, you got to blame somebody. I'm like, no, I don't blame anybody. And then they, when they find out I have a faith life, well, you must blame God. And I always used to joke with them, like, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker, cancer today. But I think what God did was give me the strength, to go forward, to move on. So, I guess I would say, one, realize that no matter how bad you feel, no matter how ugly things are, you're not anywhere close to quitting. You're not anywhere close to being done. Your body can handle a whole lot more than you think. And two, understand that you've got to have hope. You've got to believe that at some point in time, your life is going to get better. And then believe that you can handle this. Because, so many people go into this defeated. I have a friend of mine who's having surgery today for her cancer. And these last couple of weeks, she's been incredibly defeatist, and I debated whether I sent her an email, and I kind of felt bad after I did, but it was kind of like, really? You know what? You've been through all this. Come on, you can handle this. But realize that you've got to callous your mind. Realize you've got to get on top of that pain that your mind is going to give you, because if you don't, it's going to take you to a place where there's darkness, there's demons, there's a lot of ugliness, and it's awful hard to come out of that place.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about the four truths or the four F's. Do you call them both interchangeably?
So it's the 3 F's and the 4 truths. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
heavy into math here, So,
Got it.
so yeah, the 4 truths, I have them on a Post-it note here in my office. So I see them multiple times during the day, and they constantly get reinforced in my mind. So the first one is this: control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you stronger and more resilient. The third one is what I kind of refer to as the legacy truth. And it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one, I think, is kind of self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I refer to the 4 truths as kind of the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to start to try to build a quality life from.
I agree. I love that. And I want to be mindful of your time. I feel like we could be talking forever. But where can people find you, find out more about you, read your book, learn about these four truths and your story?
Yeah, I have a blog. It's called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. With that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply the thought in your life. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message there. You can get access to my book. All that is at motivationalcheck.com.
I'll link that below. I feel like that would have been an amazing resource for me when I first was diagnosed.
Thank you.
I was trying to find stuff like that. So that should be amazing for people. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And yeah, I loved our chat. I'll have to have you back on someday.
I would love that. Emily, thanks for having me on. It was great talking with you.
Well, that is it for now, lovelies. Thank you so much for tuning in. For more tips and to join our online community off the podcast, follow Lovely Digest on Instagram and Emily Beck on YouTube. The links will be below. To join our email community and get notified of new discounts, tips, and resources, follow the link in the show notes. If you thought this was helpful or know if it might help a friend, please make sure to share it, and if you feel inclined, leave a review. It really helps get these tips in front of the people who may really benefit from this community we have here. See you next week.